Hello, and welcome to For the Love of Truth. I'm called Adrian, and this is episode 290. And in this episode, I'm talking once more with Robert Jardine about German New Medicine. If you'd like to watch the previous discussion where we went through the 5 biological laws, please see the description of this podcast. In this episode, I asked Robert to take a deeper look at certain topics, and we will be discussing fibromyalgia, endometriosis and ovarian cysts that go hand in hand, and also the topic of vertigo. I found this to be another really fascinating and insightful discussion, and I hope you find it enjoyable as well. As always, you are amazing, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Take care of yourself. Goodbye. Welcome back, Robert. Thank you so much once again for joining me, and I'm looking forward to this next discussion.
Me too, Adrian. Yeah, we'll just see where this goes. I've got some plans in my head, but when I start talking, perhaps I'll end up somewhere else. So it's always the same, isn't it?
Not a problem. When we were talking before, we decided it would be a good idea to talk about things like endometriosis, ovarian cysts, fibromyalgia, and you mentioned you wanted to talk about vertigo as well. So is that all right with you?
Yeah, that's good with me. Yeah.
In that case, over to you, Robert.
Oh, jumped in the 6 foot in there then. Okay, well, I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of Dr. Hammer's work. It's all available on the learninggnm.com website, which I advise everyone to go to if they have any problems that they want, health problems that they want to understand from a German New Medicine perspective. And yourself, Adrian, you wanted to talk about endometriosis and fibromyalgia, ovarian cysts. And I put in vertigo because it's just something totally different. So I thought I would do that. So, well, if I just go from the top, fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia, so it's generalized pain within the muscles of the body. The body feels pain, sensitive to touch, and painful. The pain comes from the muscle tissue, and the muscle tissue is controlled by the brain, as we know. And muscle tissue is quite unique in that it's got 2 control centers in the brain for it. One control center controls the structure of the muscle tissue, and the other control center controls the function of the muscle tissue. Okay, so if you've got a muscle, let's say your biceps muscle, and you do your bodybuilding, okay? So you have a wish to lift a heavy weight up. So that causes the muscle to move. It causes a movement of the muscle, a contraction of the muscle is what it causes. If you lift the weight heavy enough and enough times, it causes a tissue change within the muscle, and the muscle becomes bigger and stronger, right? So you've got the 2 different parts of the brain which control the muscle. And with fibromyalgia, my understanding is that it's the second of those 2, which is the tissue relay, which is involved, which is controlled by the cerebral medulla in the brain. So the medulla is the part of the brain, it's in what's called the new brain, but it's on the inside of the new brain. The top side is the cortex, which is, if you see a picture of a brain, that's what you're looking at. But inside that wobbly gray thing, inside there is the medulla. And the medulla is what controls the tissue of the muscles, okay? It actually controls skeletal tissue and pretty much everything that's attached to the skeleton, or everything that's inside it, as in the marrow as well. So it's at play with all of them. What it does is it modulates or controls the actual tissue, the maintenance of the tissue, and the building or the loss of the tissue, depending on what the brain wants to do with it. So fibromyalgia is the skeletal muscles are involved, the brain relays are in the medulla, and it's a feeling stuck or unable to move, right, or feeling stuck type of conflict, where the body, it's like it becomes a self-devaluation conflict, where the brain or the psyche feels, if I was able to do that movement next time, I will be able to avoid that kind of situation, that kind of trauma. So it's a self-devaluation in the sense that the psyche says, that wasn't good enough. my function, that muscle wasn't good enough. Or it says, if that muscle was better, I would be able to not suffer that same conflict again. And to make it even more difficult to understand is that this perspective that this adaptation is made from is a prehistoric. It's an evolutionary perspective that the psyche has. So the psyche is trying to solve some life problem that you weren't expecting, a deeply felt problem. Is trying to solve it from the perspective of a prehistoric sense, and it's trying to solve it practically. So maybe even if you're getting stuck in life, the psyche will think, oh, well, if I had stronger muscles, I'll be able to move. I'll be able to move forward. I'll be able to gain something. So the types of conflicts that we look at with fibromyalgia are not necessarily physical. It doesn't necessarily mean that you were grabbed and held down as you're being arrested or something like that, right? Or tasered or something, right? It can be something associatively worked out. The brain associates movement with being stuck in life or not being able to hold on to your partner when she took off with the next door neighbor or something, right? Do you know what I mean? So there's this level to it as well. The muscle tissue's evolved, and when that tissue goes into healing, or when the issue goes into healing, either temporarily or permanently, you get pain. In German, you mentioned, we would say that fibromyalgia is a PCL symptom, which means post-conflictolysis. And what that means, that's a very sort of technical sounding group of words, but it means post, as in after, the conflict has been cut or resolved. I suppose lysate or something means to mean cut. So post-conflict resolution. The body goes into a healing and the muscle tissue starts to regenerate, because in conflict activity, the muscle tissue would have been degrading. So the body starts to sort of almost remove, in extreme cases, you get muscle shrinkage. And then when that conflict goes into resolution, the body starts to reverse that process and starts to rebuild it, and you get pain. So that's your fibromyalgia pain. So it's a healing symptom, but of course, why it goes on and on and on, people would say, well, why I've had this for 10 years or something. Why is it going on and on and on? That's because when we suffer the conflict, the trauma, our psyche is very adept at recording elements of that situation that you were in, and it records them permanently. And then on an entirely unconscious level, as you go through your life or as you go through your day, your psyche is monitoring everything around about you, so that if it picks up anything that reminds it of that trauma, it reactivates that trauma. And then eventually, when the psyche then, goes into healing, let's say you move your attention to somewhere else, or you go out, you go out shopping, or you go to sleep, for example, our focus changes. The psyche lets go of that connection to the trauma, which may have been 10 years ago, and you go into healing, and then the pain continues. So these conditions become chronic through tracks, primarily. They can also become chronic because if the actual situation continues, right? Let's say you were beaten up by your wife, right, and you couldn't fight her off or something. Well, if you're still living with the lady 10 years later, she could be a constant reminder of that. Or if she continues to do it, that would be another motor conflict.
Rob, this reminds me a lot in NLP of anchoring.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I do understand hypnosis. NLP is a huge part of that. Yeah.
Where you're constantly repeating the pattern because the trigger, the anchor, is constantly being fired and reinforced all the time. So it's over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's like that. Only what we're talking about here is a non-conscious, non-thought biological switch. It's like a light switch. There's not much thought involved with the psyche. It latches on to certain elements of a situation, and they are permanently stored in the brain until that situation is resolved from its perspective. And then magically, they all go away. They just go as quick as they come. And that's why fibromyalgia can be cured as quick as you get it.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
I don't have it. I've never had it, but I've worked with quite a few people that have had it, and I have seen that happen when they get well. I mean, it's not always so straightforward because everybody is very complex, and the more I work with people, and I've been doing it for quite a long time now, you realize that also the symptoms which you're suffering can also become another conflict. And right, in the case of fibromyalgia, okay, the symptoms cause you to be physically stuck in the pain. So it causes more of the same. Very often, Adrian, the symptoms can cause another conflict which is different. Okay, let me think. My mind's gone blank right now, but you get the first conflict, and then the symptoms that can cause another conflict in a different part of the different organ of the body. But for example, if you get an anger-related conflict, you could start to develop adrenal cancer, right, in the intestine somewhere, which can cause a liver cancer because the body thinks, oh, not much food getting through this gap anymore. I could starve. So I need more liver function. I need a bigger liver to get more nutrition out of the small amount of food that I'm managing to get through. So you end up getting the body then may well start a liver cancer, an adrenal liver cancer because of that, according to German New Medicine. I keep on repeating that because there are other explanations for cancer, and so for legal basis, I just put my information forward as for your information only, and you got to make your own decision about it. I'm not actually saying that this causes cancer, that doesn't cause cancer, because there's sort of legal implications to do with that, which I have to be careful with.
I think, yeah, absolutely. People must always make their own choices from the available information, but make sure they've got a wide view of the information so they can make an intelligent choice rather than we'll just lead you down this path and poison your choice.
I totally agree with that. So leading on from that, but sometimes the symptoms of fibromyalgia, they actually do stick you, they stop you moving. They make you immobile, which is the conflict which affects the muscles, unable to move. So it can easily cause more of the same. So quite often, if you're working with somebody, you're working with more than one conflict which is causing that symptom, which is interesting, right? But if you know about it, then you sort of look into that, and you can see if you can do some good work on that angle.
That also it reminds me of a recursive loop in programming, where you just get stuck in the same loop and it just runs and runs and runs. You've got to break it as part of that. So you've got one loop running like that, but you've also then got, as you said, the other side of the conflicts being created. So there's multiple things going on potentially.
Yeah, totally so. And the mind is so amazingly adaptive and so amazingly flexible. And our imaginations are even worse. It's actually not that we can suffer. It's not unusual for people to suffer conflicts on behalf of other people. Yeah, honestly, it is. I mean, even you can even suffer conflicts by believing the news.
Yep.
It really is. You can have a motor conflict. I actually worked with a lady, okay, who she had vertigo. Okay. Oh, sorry, I've gone off. I'm going to go a bit more of that later on. But she got a condition called vertigo because she saw somebody else fall off a horse, right? So that just shows you that you can get a symptom just by imagining of what's happening to somebody else. And fibromyalgia is the same. Feeling stuck, feeling trapped, it would definitely fall into that bracket.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a sort of a look into fibromyalgia.
Thank you.
From a practical, and if anybody's got fibromyalgia that's listening to this, they might think, okay, so what do we do? What can be done about this? Which is probably the most important thing. Well, the road to recovery, in my experience, is one of part of that journey is understanding. When we start to understand what's going on and why the body's doing it, we start to appreciate our bodies differently. We start to appreciate that it's not just me, this thinking me, that owns this body. There's also this psyche inside me which actually owns it and is in control of it. And you start to appreciate, okay, so I have to resolve a problem that my psyche has got. And the only way that I can communicate or understand the language of the psyche is really the language of the symptom. The symptoms are the way in which the psyche speaks to us. We consciously can say, oh, right, so, when did it start? You can go get your diary out, or you can think back, have a chat with your friends and your family. Think, when did I start getting this? And that will point you to an area of your life where some motor conflict, which would have been significant, right? It wouldn't have been a trivial thing. Something would have happened. Okay, so understanding the process of what's going on, but also in a broader context, understanding that there is this autopilot in my body and it is fully aware 24/7, okay, and it is controlling this symptom in me for all of the time I've had this symptom. It even started the symptom, and it's trying to help me, right? Believe it or not, the biological response, you can unpick it and find that there is some element in which at some time in our evolutionary history, this would have been just the right thing for us as we were then. From a sort of therapy perspective, right, and for our self-help perspective, you're really looking at finding out the trauma which has caused your psyche and your body to respond practically and it's created this symptom. One sort of little caveat to that is that with fibromyalgia, it's a healing symptom. So the pain starts when the conflict goes into resolution. So, but in reality, if you've had the condition for some years, it's likely that you will be able to find that conflict just from when the pain started to come on. And if at some time the pain got significantly worse, okay, then you might sort of think, okay, what in life, the actual conflict which caused the initial shock may have got worse somehow. I'm not sure how that could happen. Or it could be that you've kind of become allergic to your symptoms of fibromyalgia. That would be an indicator of that, where the symptom becomes the cause of the problem again. So there's lots of information. Well, if you can, sit down with a big long piece of paper, stick like 3 or 4 sheets of A4 paper together, draw a big line right down it along the middle and say, right, well, on the top of this line, I'll draw the symptom. Was it bad? Was it good? Was it bad? Was it good? So you get like this jiggly line going up and down, bad, good. Then on the bottom line, you draw this symptom, and at some point, the symptom would have started. So below the line, you start putting things that happened.
Well, so you're drawing a timeline, effectively.
A timeline, exactly. That's what I'm describing, a timeline. The more you keep playing about with that timeline and really being as best you can accurate and honest with it, and don't make the timeline fit what you think, just genuinely put things in the right place, you can then start to get a lot of information, which is a really good, it's like a compass almost if you're lost, it keeps you pointing in the right direction,
Yeah. Actually, funny enough, speaking on compasses, many years ago when I was lost, my daughter gave me a compass and she said, this will help you find your way, Dad. And I gave it back to her recently because she's lost right now.
Aye, that's lovely. That's a nice story, that. There's nothing worse than being lost. I'll tell you, I've got a boat, right? And I'm no hardened sailor, I'm just do it because, I was interested in it. But I mean, I've been at sea, the fog comes in and you're helpless. When you're lost, it's not a nice place to be, everything becomes, even small problems become, much worse than they need to be. But when you suddenly, the mist rises and you start to see the bigger picture of where you are, it's like, oh, sense of relief. And okay, you're not home yet, but at least you know where you're going.
What a great metaphor.
Yeah. And G&M is like that to me. It's just like the sun coming up and lifting the fog. And it's like, okay, so I've still got this problem, but heck, now I understand it. And I now know I've got some way forward with it. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a little bit on fibromyalgia. So pain in the muscles, feeling stuck conflict, unable to move conflict. And it goes into its second phase and you get the pain. But why it lasts so long is because we keep on reactivating the conflict with tracks, things that are reminding our psyche of the original conflict and just keeping the whole process going and going and going. Can you ask me some questions on that? Have you got anything there that I haven't been clear about?
I think you've been very clear on that. That's been extraordinarily helpful. And of course, as with the other discussion we had, Rob, that's making me think in terms of all sorts of other symptoms, because the same structural idea will apply, won't it? That it can be self-reinforcing, there can be, internal triggers, external triggers. It's really interesting.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, tracks and triggers are hugely important in any chronic condition. As I've said, the moment that we suffer a DHS, it is a type of shock which our biological body latches onto and starts to, it involves the brain really and the related organ or tissue. Well, in reality, the psyche is almost connected by an invisible thread to that life issue. And we're tracking it. Our mind, our psyche's tracking it. And also, it's connected to anything that reminds the psyche is remembered, that it remembered in the moment of the shock. So we can become allergic to many things, or allergic to be reactive to many things.
That choice of word there, reactive instead of allergic, I think changes your view of the problem, because an allergy, suggests something, well, I can't do anything about it. Whereas if I'm having some kind of reaction to that, I can work out what's behind the reaction and the reasoning behind that and address it.
Yes, exactly. And the timeline is a great place to start. I mean, obviously go to the Learning GNM website and really understand what the brain's trying to do best you can, right? I mean, it's not an easy read, that website, but it's not so difficult, because once you've gone through it a few times, you see it's just like you said earlier, it's the same pattern repeating and repeating. When you go into the biological brain, it's perfectly logical from its perspective, and you can predict it perfectly. You can predict everything about it. You can predict when the heart attack's going to come, when the breast cancer is going to cure, when the epileptic fix is going to happen. You can predict those things, especially if you got access to CT scans of the brain and you can interpret those. You can predict it, and even more accurately. It's incredible. Dr. Hammer himself, he was so good at it. You could just give him a pile of brain scans, and he would ask one or two questions like, "Is it male or female? Is the person left-handed or right-handed? Is it premenopausal or postmenopausal?" And once he had those few bits of basic information, because they're crucially important, once you know that, he could just look at a brain scan and say, well, you've got ulcers in the mouth, and you've got athlete's foot, and you've got Crohn's disease, and you've got blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? It was just incredible. And it was bang on right every time. And he would also look at it and say, oh, by the way, you probably don't know this, but you also had you had breast cancer, but it's all gone now. And the woman goes, oh, did I? Yeah, so but he actually, to be honest with you, he wouldn't actually tell them that, because that would just worry people.
Yes. Well, yeah, that becomes another trigger, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. The brain scanning really is the sort of the proof of proof. It's like the objective visual proof that everything he says is 100% accurate. But you don't need the brain scan, because the work's been done. If you've got the symptom, then this process is driving it, because the biological brain is always doing the same thing. You can predict it 100%.
So, endometriosis.
Right. So endometriosis starts with a burst ovarian cyst. So the ovaries are the organs within a woman that produce the eggs. So it's about reproduction and reproduction and life and caring, nurturing type of conflict. Okay, it's not an aggressive conflict or an anger-driven conflict. The tissue of the ovary that is involved, when we suffer a loss conflict, or when a woman suffers a loss conflict, a loss of someone they care for, not a thing, like it's not a loss of a house or a sports car, the loss of a friend or a mother or a father or a pet even, or we have, let's say, the loss of the unconceived child. There's a big one. We can suffer a conflict which affects the ovarian tissue. And when that conflict is active, because it's controlled from the new half of the brain, this means that when the conflict is active, we have tissue loss. So we have an ovarian necrosis taking place in a certain area on a very specific ovary, which the psyche will have decided in the very moment of the DHS. So in the very moment of the shock, the psyche just judged it in that split of a second and said, right, I need to make myself more fertile. This will help me if I ever have to suffer this again. Okay. And So when the conflict is active, the psyche is tracking the conflict, the psyche is controlling the brain relay, and the brain relay is controlling the tissue, and the tissue is becoming eroded away. So you get loss of tissue in an area of the ovary. Because the ovaries produce estrogen, you get lowered estrogen, which is another symptom of it. It can reduce your periods, maybe even you lose your periods. You may become, unable to have periods and conceive. And that would be, now there you go. That would be another situation where we were talking about the symptom becomes another conflict, which causes the same symptom. Yeah. If, let's say if you're struggling to have a child, you're struggling to get pregnant, right? And you then have this loss conflict because of the unconceived child, which then causes the first stage of an ovarian cyst, which is the necrosis of the tissue, which causes the low estrogen, which causes the infertility. So you've got yourself in a loop that you can't get out of without sort of like learning German new medicine. Learning German new medicine is a bit like climbing up a steep hill, right? But when you get to the top, okay, you can look at life, you can look at yourself, you can look at your symptoms, and you can make sense of them because they are sensible. They're sensible biological special adaptation or adaptation programs. That's what they are. That it's trying to help you in some way. And it's only when you climb up the mountain through a little bit of hard work or you can pay for my time, but you can do it for nothing by going to that website. I'm not here to make loads of money out of people's pain, right? I'm here to sort of spread the word about Dr. Hammer's discoveries because they're the most important that you can ever learn. The ovaries have cellular loss when the conflict's active, reduced estrogen, might affect your period somewhat, affect your fertility, which again can kick in, as we've said, okay? But when the conflict is resolved, the body then says, okay, I'm going to rebuild. I'm now going to rebuild this crater in my ovary, okay? And it makes it bigger. At the end of it, when the process is finished, not only will the crater be refilled, but there will be like an extension built onto it. It's almost like you have to knock a hole in the wall of your house, right? You got to live with this great big hole in the house with, all the turmoil that causes. But by the time you get your planning permission through and the builders have cleared up and left, right? You've ended up with a great big open plan kitchen stuck on the side of your house. It's much better. All programs that run from the cerebral medulla have this kind of attitude to them that, okay, you're going to suffer the pain just now, but when this is all over, that organ will be better. And the same happens for endometriosis. That's what we're talking about. So we got the tissue, okay. When the conflict resolves, okay, then the body moves in the builders back into the site and it starts to rebuild it, and it forms a cyst. And this cyst is full of biological activity. Is a skin around it, a sort of fragile skin around it, and it grows. It can be like quite a big bubble, like a big blister on the side of an ovary, right? And in fact, it can actually be very big. It can be the size of, I don't know, maybe the size of a big orange or a melon or something. It can actually get really, really big, right?
Mm-hmm. And incredibly painful, I would think.
Very much so. Painful. I mean, you can't add something that big inside your tummy without something getting pressed or tweaked or pulled, right? So it's going to have lots of other symptoms with it. So the ovary's growing and growing and growing, and it needs lots of supplies to enable the body, all the processes inside to continue. So what it does, it attaches itself to anything round about it that it can get blood from. And sometimes if a doctor delves inside you and sees that, they say, oh, it's an invasive cancer of some type because it's attaching itself, right? But that's just a lot of rubbish, right? Body is not trying to harm us, but our body is trying to keep us alive for its own sake, right? We're just riding. We're just in the cab riding, enjoying the ride. But we have no idea what's happening in the body. But trust me, it's trying to keep itself alive and us with it. So the cyst has gotten big, right? It's attached itself with little blood vessels going to wherever it can get blood. But if all goes well, in 9 months, okay, all the building work will be done, and the cyst will detach itself from everything, and it will become an integral unit of the ovary, and it will be producing more of the fertile hormones, estrogen. So the woman will be more fertile. She'll be ovulating stronger. She'll look younger. She'll be more up for it. Okay, that's the purpose of it. The body's saying, this is what I want to achieve. And it makes sense if you think about the initial conflict, a loss of someone. Well, what's the best way to get over the loss is to fill the gap. Yeah. So you becoming looking, younger, more sexual, more fertile, you're going to do that biologically better. That's the purpose of it. Okay, so that's an ovarian cyst, right? So endometriosis, it's a description of the part of the process where the cyst has attached itself to everything. Okay, so if it's looked at and it causes pain and discomfort, okay, and if it's looked at by a medical person, they would say, "Oh my God, it's attached everywhere. You've got this endometriosis." Another possibility, and this is quite a significant possibility, is that during this period of 9 months, when the conflict resolved and the cyst started to grow, okay, so the crater in the ovary started to be healed and a cyst formed over it, and it becomes as big as it becomes. In that period, it's like a fluid sac where the activity's happening. If, for example, we fall or we play kickboxing or somebody hits you or you fall off your horse or something, right? You have some kind of injury, it bursts it, and all of the fluid spills out into the region of the abdomen, right? Inside there. And with it spill out loads of fragments of regenerating ovary. Yeah. Well, what happens is they start attaching here and there, start to regenerate on wherever they attach. You see? So that is another part of this endometriosis. Okay?
That's how you can end up with multiple cysts then.
Yes. If you're lucky enough to know that you've got that developing, and you're lucky enough to understand German new medicine and the process, right? You don't do physical things that are going to, burst that, right? And, when you think about it, nature's not trying to kill us or harm us. It's actually trying to help us, and it's all quite logical, right? You've had a lost conflict, deeply unexpected, deeply felt conflict situation. The brain's latched onto it. The body's latched onto it. And the wisdom of the body comes to play, and it says, right, well, if you can get over this and we can resolve this and we'll get through the reparation process phase, at the end of it, you will be better than when you started. And that's the beauty of it. That's what it's trying to do. So I'm saying that to sort of lose the worry, right? It's not just a pain in the backside that you've got this condition. It's not just bad luck. It's happening for a very specific reason to help you. Your body's trying to help you. And you need to help your body help you, and also you need to take a life lesson from it. That's the most important thing. When I work with people, they come with all kinds of stuff wrong with them. Apparently, it's not wrong with them, but it's a symptom that we assume is wrong with them, but it's actually the body trying to do the right thing. But at the end of it, and Dr. Hammer even talked about this. He says, the first healing is I think he says something like, the first healing is the body healing, but the second healing is a spiritual one. You have to learn, you have to become more from the experience you've gone through and become wiser and able to avoid it in the future, or able to deal with it better in the future at least, and perhaps even able to be a better member of life through that experience too. That might even be part of it, I'm a bit like that. I'm a bit, sort of spiritually minded. I like to think that that's part of it. And that's what Hammer says as well, and I trust everything that man says or said. So that's really my sort of thought on endometriosis, and just sort of understand it, if you get the diagnosis somehow, okay, well, fair dues, you can understand, go to the website, understand it, and go into this problem with a sense, okay, my body's trying to help me do something here. Let's go back, if I can, let's find out what caused it and fully resolve that. Do whatever I need to do, practically is the best, to resolve that, so that is all over and done. The body can enter a full healing phase now, right? And I will just nurture my body through that. It's going to take at least 9 months, and I'm going to be very careful with my abdomen Okay. And something else that I feel I should add to this, because it applies to everything, is that there's a thing called the syndrome in German new medicine. And the syndrome is when our biological brains react to an existence or abandonment conflict. And what the body does when it sustains an existence or abandonment conflict is it partially closes the function of the kidneys. And what that does is it causes water retention. And it's very, very common, much, much more common than you would know it, right? It's very common, especially if you have suffered any shocks, like, big diagnostic words that might have been given to you at the clinic, and you go, oh God, that sounds, I'm doomed or something, right? So the reason I mention this is that it's as I work with people, it's always part of my sort of protocol is to the best I can check that we don't have water retention going on, because a cyst like an endometriosis, we've got the ovarian cyst, which we've talked about at length. Okay, well, let's say that cyst should have been the size of a grape, but if you've got a running abandonment, if you've got a running kidney conflict going, that cyst will stretch to the size of an apple, because all of the fluid, or a high proportion of the fluid that the body does not urinate out, will get pumped into that cyst. So abandonment existence conflicts are really important, right? Very, very much so. They can turn a manageable situation into a catastrophe if you don't know it and manage it properly. What tends to happen? What does happen when we have a kidney conflict running is that we don't urinate as much as we drink. Well, we should urinate pretty close to what we drink, especially if you're living a normal life. You're not like sweating like heck, doing a marathon or something. That's different, right? But if you're just living a normal life, you count up your fluid intake and you pee into a bowl and you measure the output, and it shouldn't be too much different, right? But if it is, and you're putting on weight, then that's very likely that you've got a kidney collecting tubule conflict running. So that's just another piece of really good information out there. And go to that website and you can look at that. There's a whole section on that. Really worth knowing that. So we've talked fibromyalgia and ovarian cysts, which kind of, are the same topic, really.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And that makes sense as to why certainly the women I know with that, they go in tandem. They never have one, they have both.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. Body is always trying to keep us on the rocky road of life, okay? And we do our best to throw ourselves off it. So that's what happens, and of course...
Well, it's not just us, is it, Robert? I mean, the whole entertainment system, the news, everything also plays a big hand in the manipulation of the body in that way by attacking the psyche.
Well, hey, health is a big business, and when you realize business is controlling everything, even entertainment, business is looking after itself, and we're both the raw materials of it. We're also the market of it. We're the creator of its wealth. I mean, it's that again is the spiritual journey, I suppose. That's part of the walking up the mountain to see the truth. That's part of it, and it's a long road. I've been doing it for quite a long time, and ever since 2020, there's been other mountains I've never even realized existed that I've now started to walk up. Great, eh?
Good man. Would you like to talk about vertigo quickly?
Yes. So vertigo is a sense of spinning and falling, and it's triggered by a conflict which affects the vestibular organs, which are part of the inner ear. Okay, the inner ear does two things. The cochlea converts physical pressure into electrical signals so that you can hear things. So the ear, the eardrum vibrates, and you got the little tiny wee bits of bones in there that do stuff, and it creates electrical signals, right? And you hear. But you also got the three semicircular canals, which allow us to a sense of equilibrium, I think it's called, balance and movement. So a conflict which affects those is a falling conflict, and you can suffer it yourself. And the more precarious you feel in life, the more you can suffer it. So if you're old or you're young, you're more likely to suffer it. Okay. When the fear of falling is much more grave, like if you're if you're 85 and you fall, you might have talked yourself into having weak bones by then. So you're going to be, oh my God, if I fall over here, I'm going to break my hip again or something, right? So,
Isn't that funny that the thing it creates is the thing you fear?
yeah, true. Go with that very often. And the more, the funny thing is, right, the more you believe this great big lie called life, right, the life that we've been told that exists, right, the more fearful we are. It's all about creating fear in us. Entertainment, call it, or information, call it what you will, the news or current affairs, and everything else. It's all about creating fear. The more fearful you are of the falling, the more likely you are to contract vertigo. Okay, you can also contract, as I said earlier. I had a person who had a fear. I can't remember now. Was it a fear of the daughter falling off the horse, or she saw her daughter fall off the horse? But anyway, she got the vertigo. Okay, which is a bad lot, really, because I think the daughter just got up and got back on the horse, but the mother was obviously, biting her fingernails, and she ended up with vertigo. A fear of falling. So the purpose of it. So you might say, okay, Robert, how on earth does vertigo try to help us? If you're saying everything's trying to help us, what's the logic that Dr. Hammer has put to that? Well, it actually makes you fall. It makes you either fall or it makes you sit down, right? And that's the purpose of it. It puts you in a safe place, puts you flat on the ground, safe. Okay. And what's even more absolutely fantastic about his discovery about this is that, and I'm just going to go on a little bit about this, and it's one of those things that applies to 90% of German new medicine. So I'll talk about it just now. It's whether it's the right, whether you feel like you're spinning or falling to the right or spinning and falling to the left, because it is actually, believe it or not, it is significant. And whether you're left-handed or right-handed, that as well is significant, because everything in nature is orderly. Everything in nature is happening for a reason. Nothing is by bad luck or by chance. So if somebody, male or female, is right-handed, then the right half of their brain and the left half of their body, because there's this cross connection, okay, so the right half of their physical brain and therefore the left half of the body, internal and external, which it controls, is the psyche, which operates within the right physical half of the brain and therefore controls the left half of the body, has a perspective or has an outlook on life that puts everything in relation to our mother or nest. So it's a nest worry or a connection with the mother. So a nest is our babies, our home, and maybe little pets that we look after, things that we nurture. Okay, so it's like in the nest, and the mother is also in the nest. Okay, whereas the physical left half of the brain in a right-handed person, okay, so get it, it goes on, but you've got to get it. So in a right-handed person, the physical left half of the brain controls the right half of the body. And in a right-handed person, that's your dominant half, right? You're right-handed, you're right-footed, right? The conflicts are processed within the perspective of in relation to my pack or my partner, which is a pack member. And in the pack is basically everything that's not in the nest. So even people you really don't like at work or wherever, they're in the pack. So the spinning in vertigo also, if you're a right-handed person and you spin to the left, the sensation of spinning and falling to the left, then it gives us a clue that the conflict shock would have been in relation to your child or mother or your nest. So isn't that amazing? Even the way that we sense this spinning and falling sensation, even that has got meaning to it. Whereas if we're right-handed and we fall to the right, then the trauma, the DHS which set it off, the shock element of it will have been relevant to, or the shock would have been caused through the relevance in relation to pack members, something to do with the pack, right? So this is a really good tool to get on the timeline with, because once you get this downloaded into your mind, you can look at your timeline and think, oh, right, yeah, what scared me? When did my symptoms start? Well, it was 8 years ago. Where were we? Well, we were at Blackpool. Oh, right. And I was watching my grandmother on the flipping, death slide or something, right? And I got the shock for her. Now, grandmother probably would come under mother as well. Okay, it'll be more than likely a nest conflict. So that right-handed woman, she'll go, yeah, that's right. I do. I feel I'm spinning to the left all the time. That's right. But if she's spinning to the right all the time, you think, that probably won't be that then. Oh, it could be the time when, either herself or her partner fell and broke his leg off his motorbike when he was doing the TT, right? Right, and she got the phone call and the shock, and it just chilled her to the bone. And then ever since then, you with me? So you can build up a relevance from this sort of basic information of the mechanisms of the psyche and the brain. You can build that in to find out, probe more and more into your life to actually find the conflict. And that is, that's really what you want to get to. That's like trying to find, the pearl in the oyster. Do you know what I mean? You get the conflict, right? Then if you can go into that conflict on the right emotional thread and sort of disperse, or if the conflict, for example, is no longer relevant, if it's been and gone, 10 years past or whatever, right? But the mind is still latched onto it. In those situations, if you can find that emotional thread right into that conflict, right, bang, magic happens. And it all disperses. And then the brain scan changes, the body goes through healing, and all of a sudden you start getting well. And nothing you can do about it. That doesn't work if the conflict is still ongoing, right? Because there's no resolution in there. But it is really the way to go, for any therapeutic way. If it's safe to heal this conflict, and not all conflicts are safe, so we have to remember that. But if it is safe to heal this, like spinning conflict, or this fibromyalgia conflict, or this endometriosis conflict, which they are, okay, then to be able to get in, to find exactly as you can the real emotional thread that was going on and what was happening, then the brain can suddenly, it's almost like the psyche gives up the problem to the conscious mind, and it allows the body to go back to normal and start at what we would call a healing symptom. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with any symptom. The body's just trying to help you. If you've got an adenocarcinoma growing, it's just because it's trying to help you digest something in life. Do you know what I mean? The only thing that's wrong is your life, or in fact, that's not even true. Your perception of life is causing you the problem, right? And everything else is trying to help you resolve that problem. But of course, you get the diagnosis, and then all hell breaks loose because they tell you you've got something that you're very frightened of, and then that causes another pile of things to happen. It's all ignorance, right? With this knowledge, you can sort of tread into life with confidence. You're going to be ready to at least appreciate that your body is not trying to kill you. No matter what anybody says to you in a white coat, you're going to be fine, right? And with this knowledge, and with the knowledge of German new medicine and Dr. Hammer's work, it really is it's a method of understanding our body's reactions. What's called disease, which isn't disease at all. It's actually a symptom of a biological adaptation to help us cope with a perceived trauma. And it's a lot less frightening. And it's all possible. It's all possible then.
Yes, yeah? It is. Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. It also makes me think that with this knowledge and the mindset and becoming more, I suppose, familiar and practiced at it, you'll learn the significance of traumas just after they happen. So you should be able to unpack them, if it's safe to do so, quickly, so that you actually prevent some of the developments of some of the symptoms because they're no longer required.
Yeah, that's true. The only thing I'd add to that is you've got no idea what your psyche's done until you get the symptom, right? Because you could get 10 people watching England getting slaughtered at football in the World Cup, right? 3 of them might get nothing at all. One of them might get a heart attack. Another one might get diabetes from it, right? If they're so into it, right? Do you know what I mean? I'm making a sort of silly analogy here, but you with me? They're all watching the same TV in the same room, but there's 10 different experiences of that, right? So you don't know. There's no point saying, "Oh, I've just had a crash. Or I've just almost had a near miss on the motorway," right? Oh my God, I'm going to have this. That you've got no idea. The only way you know is either if you get a CT scan of your brain, or if you just wait for the symptom to manifest. And that, again, is not really a good way to go through life, waiting for the symptom. But what you do is you say, look, when a symptom manifests, that tells me what the psyche has experienced. And you can work it A, B, C, D, right through, bang, 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 bang. You can work it all out through Dr. Hammer's work, what's going on, what I need to do. If anything, most times, like you get the flu or COVID or call it what you want, right? It's just a healing symptom. So you've nothing to do. You just need to rest, lie down, watch telly, and don't believe it. Just relax, listen to music, or enjoy yourself. Yeah, so that is, and you know, it takes the worry out of it. That's the best thing. Everything becomes a problem, like a not a problem. It becomes like, okay, so that must, you sort of work it out. It becomes an interesting problem to solve, like a little one of those little things, those little abacuses, or not an abacus. You know, those little the back in the day when I was young, right? You know, we didn't have computers or mobile phones. We had these little toys that you could, these wooden things you slide up and down and round, and then you could form a picture or a word or something, and you try and solve this little thing. Well, that's kind of what German New Medicine does to us when we learn it, because the body then becomes, oh, so I've got this happening there. Wonder what caused that. You become interested in your own body and you become understanding of it, but you do not fear it. You don't fear it anymore.
Become a detective.
Yes, and you lose the fear, and that's the most important thing, because fear is the most dangerous of emotions.
Brilliant. I have to say, Robert, that was absolutely fantastic yet again.
Oh, great. Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I give this information because the world so desperately needs it. And I'm lucky enough, having had some pretty unfortunate events which have led me to it. So it's been all for the greater good. Definitely.
It's always the way, my mate.
Yeah.